everyone. This is Rebecca with Conscious Accounting. Welcome back to our podcast. Today we have Julie Dye, owner of Blossom and Shine, with us. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to chat with you today, especially because you're one of my dearest friends in the community. So it's really fun to have a friend and a client on today. And let's start by just hearing about your business and about your kind of evolution of your career. Like, did you always want to make jewelry? What do you make? Like, just tell us the whole story.
Okay, so I make handmade jewelry. I'm a metalsmith now. I use sterling silver and 14 karat gold filled materials. I make dainty geometric pieces. I like to say it's jewelry that you can wear every day, any outfit. I did not start out making jewelry. I started my business 11 years ago.
Wow.
I had just moved to St. Pete from New York City and had some money saved up and knew I wanted to have my own business making something. I didn't know exactly how that was going to go. So the skills I had at the time were bookbinding and working with papers. So I started just making products using these beautiful Japanese papers that I had and doing markets selling those.
So how did you get into that? That seems like so random that you just would know about Japanese, like,
Right.
what's the story with that?
So I went to school for photography at Ringling in Sarasota. And while I was there, I took a lot of bookbinding classes because it just worked really well with photography.
Interesting.
And just fell in love with that because I just love working with my hands. So when I moved to New York after college, I ended up getting a job with a photographer working in his studio, like creating his prints. And part of the reason they hired me was because of my bookbinding skills, because we also like built his portfolios. So I ended up, just kind of furthering my skills with bookbinding and working with all these different papers that he used for his prints. He used a lot of different materials.
So bookbinding, that's just, taking pages and putting a cover around it and making a...
Yeah, it's pretty much building a book from scratch,
Wow.
like cutting the paper. And then, my favorite part was always like the stitching of the pages together and then attaching it to the cover. And
That's so cool.
yeah, it's really cool. It's a lot of fun. But it's not the easiest thing to sell and make money on because it's very time consuming and it's hard to really charge a price that justifies the amount of time that it takes. So as I was selling, I was always just kind of like trying out different products. I started making some paper jewelry and people were really, drawn to that. So it was like, okay, I need to go in this direction. So I kept increasing the amount of paper jewelry I was making.
So what is paper jewelry?
Well, for me, it was really creating like folded paper pieces and then attaching it to an earring.
Oh, cool.
But then, of course, the issue became, how do I make this so that it's going to last a long time? So I had to, find a way to treat the paper so that it wasn't going to just fall apart when someone was wearing it.
Yeah.
But there was still limitations in that. I couldn't really ever make it like last forever.
Right. Interesting.
So that was when I decided to take a silversmithing class.
Where'd you do that?
I did it at the Dunedin Fine Arts Center.
Okay.
So I just took one class so I could kind of like understand
Get
the
a
basics
background.
of it. And that made it. Then I came up with the idea of wrapping these coils of paper that I had in the metal and then coating it with resin on both sides. And now it's waterproof. Now it lasts forever. It's covered in metal, so it's shiny and sparkly. And then attaching those to pieces of jewelry. But then once I started doing metalsmithing, I was like, oh man, I really love this too. So, I started playing more with metal and making pieces just out of metal, and people were really liking that. And now, the majority of what I make is metalworking, but I do still have some paper pieces that I incorporate. And now I'm starting to work a little bit with stones as well.
Cool.
So I like to call it my blended material jewelry.
Yes, I love that.
So yeah, that's kind of how I ended up where I am. A lot of trial and error and really just listening to what people wanted and what people liked.
That is such a great point because I think that a lot of business owners forget that, your customers will just tell you what to do, They'll
Exactly.
tell you what they
Yeah.
want, and if you just listen
Yeah.
and pivot around what they are looking for, then, you can be very profitable that way.
Absolutely.
Have you ever felt like what your customers want is not really what you want to make?
Um, well, I mean, a lot of times the stuff that sells the best is like the super basic pieces, which are,
Mhm.
less involved work wise for
Mhm.
me. And of course, I like the things that take a lot of time to make.
Right, right.
But the things that take a lot of time to make are also more expensive because of that.
Right. Yep.
But those pieces still sell. They just don't sell as much as the more simple pieces. So, I get to do both.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So like, how did you start selling? Like, where did you sell the first time? And
Um, Gosh, the first market I did was like it was just like a random like event in the Grand Central District. And this
uh-huh.
was like 11 years ago, so St. Pete was very
Wow.
different then.
Yeah.
I think I made like $50 or something,
And you were like, yes,
Yeah.
crushed it.
I mean, and if you look at like what my booth display looked like back then, it's embarrassing. But
Aw,
you have to figure it out as we go.
absolutely.
Um, so it took about a year of trying a bunch of different markets, and then I was able to get into the Saturday morning market about a
Wow.
year in, and that really was a game changer for me.
Yeah. Yeah, because they just get such a audience each week.
Yeah,
So
yeah, it's great.
that's really cool. That's really cool. So when you were at these markets, did you also get to know the other business owners and sort of network and build a community together around making and
Yeah, for sure. Like I mean, the majority of my friends are people I've met at markets.
wow.
It's a great community. It's a lot of just sharing about our struggles and figuring things that we're figuring out.
Mhm.
So it's helpful to have that community to kind of bounce things off of what we're trying, what's working, what's helping with this, what's helping with display or online sales or
Right.
so I feel like having that community is it's really important in helping to grow your business.
Yeah. What about with like other people who make jewelry? Like, do you feel like you can still build community with people that are like in your field, or can that be tricky? Like,
I mean, I think it depends on the person.
yeah.
But yeah, I've definitely met some great other jewelers who are just open to like, sharing like
Yeah.
ideas. There's one woman who does the Saturday morning market who's, been doing it for years and she teaches it. And she was a wonderful resource for me to be like, I'd be like, hey, I don't know how to do this, because I really only
Yeah.
took the one class and then I just
Right.
kind of taught myself everything
That's
else. So
amazing.
she was always great about sharing her expertise on metal working that she'd been doing for like 30 years. So
Wow.
yeah.
That's so cool. And you've done markets in other states too, right?
Yeah, I did the Renegade Craft Fair. I've done Brooklyn, Chicago,
Wow.
Austin, and Miami.
Oh my goodness.
Mostly Chicago. That was the one that I went to multiple times because
Yeah.
I have family there, and
That
it's a great event.
is
And then
that different than Saturday Morning Market? Like, what's it like?
yeah, it's different because it's like all of the businesses there are just incredible. Like they've got their branding down, like their products are really cool and really different. Like I mean, they have such a huge selection of businesses to choose from
Mhm.
and they do such a great job of curating, the people that are there. So just getting in is like an honor because you're like, "Oh my
Wow.
god, I feel like there are these businesses that I kind of looked up to that I got to see their booth in
Yeah.
person and talk to them and that was really exciting. So it's just a cool event to be at.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. So, do you so markets seem like kind of your main way that you sell products, or do you have other ways that you've kind of come across that you like to sell?
Right. Markets definitely for probably the first, I don't know, even 8 years were my bread and butter, like
Mhm.
that was it. But I've, over the past probably 5 or 6 years, I've just made an effort in trying to really, increase my online sales,
Mhm.
and my, social media, email
Yeah.
campaigns, that kind of stuff. So as of last year, like markets were really only making up like 50 to
Oh, wow.
60% of
Yeah.
my income. And then I do some wholesale. I experimented with doing a lot of wholesale and then kind of realized that wasn't the direction I wanted to go because I was
Mhm.
just like a production machine.
Right.
So now it's, a little bit of wholesale and then markets and online. And I'm always working on, trying to increase the online.
Yeah. So online would just be, like, through your website?
Yeah, through my
Uh-huh.
website and through Etsy.
Okay,
Yeah.
Etsy, cool. And what kind of stores carry your stuff wholesale?
Right now it's local shops.
Mhm.
I'm in Armature Works in
Oh, cool.
Tampa, and then Miss Red Outfitters in downtown
Mhm.
St. Pete. And there's another shop called Neat Neat Neat
Oh, yeah, I've heard
that
that's a
opened
new business,
recently.
yeah.
She has some of my jewelry, and I just made a connection with one of the groups that's selling a bunch of artist work on the pier.
Oh, wow.
So I'll have some stuff on the pier, which will
Oh,
be
that's
really cool.
amazing.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so cool. So what would you say is your favorite way to sell products?
Oh, that's tough. I mean, I think probably my favorite way is in person, like at
Mhm.
markets, because you get to experience the person seeing it and getting excited about it. And, you just don't get that same interaction
Yeah.
online. Even though it's still really exciting to get an order online, it's great when you can interact with people. And like I said, that's how I learn about
That feedback, yeah.
what I want to do next, is kind of
Right.
hearing what people are looking for.
Absolutely. And so because I know you, I know that you have a special guest at the market with you. So tell me a little bit about that and what it's like to have that dynamic.
So my mom, who's amazing, has been doing markets with me since I started. She did
Wow.
that first one with me where I made $50. Um, she's awesome, super supportive.
Yeah.
And it's also just really helpful to have a helping hand with
Yeah.
setup and for me, when someone purchases something, we wrap it in a
Mhm.
cute packaging and
Yeah.
so it's really nice to have someone who can handle one aspect of packaging while I'm, handling the payment so that people aren't just like waiting
Right.
for like 10 minutes while I wrap everything up. So, yeah, she's amazing.
That's so cool. Yeah. And she's so fun and friendly and,
Yes.
just loves your products
Yeah,
and
she's
yeah.
such a huge part of my business. Every time I create a new product, she's the first person that I'm like,
Oh,
what do you think? Try it on, see how it feels. She's like my tester. So
that's so
she's just
cool.
as enthusiastic about the jewelry as I am.
Has she ever tried to make something herself or
She does help me in the studio with some of the simpler tasks. She doesn't actually make something herself, but
Mhm.
she's constantly contributing to the ideas, and telling me, oh, what about this? Or she'll give me ideas of, something that I should try. So,
That's so cool.
yeah.
Wow. So you mentioned your studio. So, as an accountant, I get lots of questions from clients. And one big one is always, how do I know when it's time to get my own space, like and
Right.
not work out of my home anymore?
Hmm.
And I know that you made that transition a few years ago, right? From
Yeah, it was about 3 years ago.
3 years ago. Wow, time flies.
I know.
And so what were you doing before you started renting a studio? And then what are you doing now? And why did that happen? How did it happen? What do you like? What don't you like?
Yeah. So I worked out of my house for eight
Mhm.
years, in several different houses that we moved, and
Mhm.
my workspace was slowly taking over the house. And I hadn't really considered a studio until my husband and I were looking to move back to St. Pete. We were living in Largo,
Mhm.
and we knew that for us to be able to afford a place in St. Pete, we were going to have to downsize.
Mhm.
So it was kind of like, how am I going to make my studio work? My husband's also a musician, so he
Mhm.
was also working out of the house. So it was like, how are we going to fit all of our stuff? He's got a lot of equipment
Yeah.
into a smaller space. So I started looking into what kind of studios were out there. There at the time there were not a lot. There's more now, but even still, they're not easy to get. There's
Yeah.
long waiting lists for
Wow.
art studios.
Mhm.
So I got on the waiting list.
Mhm.
Kind of like, all right, well, we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
We ended up buying a house in St. Pete. which was definitely a lot smaller. But we made it work, you know? I
Yeah.
fit into a really small room. He fit into an even smaller room that was like at the front of the house. And about a year after we were in the house, I got a call saying, "Hey, we have a studio. Are you still interested?"
Wow.
So it was kind of like, oh man, I just like got comfortable in this space.
Right. Right.
But I knew that it was the right step to take to like further my business.
Yeah. And how did you know that? Like, why is that the right step?
Well, I knew that if I ever wanted to hire someone or
Mhm.
even, just having my mom come and help wasn't always really possible in our house, because there
Right.
really wasn't a lot of room for her to even
Yeah.
fit. So it was like, if I have a space that's out of the house and it's bigger than the space I'm working in, I could then have someone come and help me.
Totally.
And then part of the benefit that made me really make the decision was that, I would have a space where I could have my customers come.
Mm.
So even though it was going to be this additional expense, I was also going to have the potential to make more money by being there.
Right.
Because, currently it was either you find me at a market or you shop online.
Yeah.
So now I have a space where it's like, hey, if you can't make it to the market, reach out and you can schedule an appointment to come and shop with me in person.
Cool.
And then the space where I'm at called the Art Lofts.
Mm-hmm.
We participate in Art Walk every month,
Oh, cool.
which is the second Saturday of every month. So that's another, event where people are coming in and seeing my studio. So I'm reaching a new audience
Yeah.
through that as well. So, the benefits just kind of outweighed the cost for me,
Mhm.
and it's ended up being one of the best moves I ever made.
Wow, really? So
Yeah.
what else do you like about it?
I mean, the best part is just my productivity. Like, I didn't think that I was not being productive at home, but until I was out of the house, and then I realized, like, man, I get so much more work done when I'm there because there's no distractions. Like, I'm just totally
Right.
focused on work when I'm there. And
Interesting.
it made me appreciate being at home more. Like, when you're at home and you're working at home, like, work is always there. Like, it's
Yeah.
always like it's hard to step away from work because there's always something to do when
Yep.
you run your own business.
Yeah.
So now when I go home, I'm just at home
Yeah.
and I can just watch TV or like, do whatever and not. I mean, work is always on the mind, but
Right.
I can't work when I'm at home.
No, you
So
literally can't. There's no equipment there or anything.
exactly. So
So
that's been really, really good for me.
that's great. So now you have that balance between, do you think you work more hours or less hours? Like, has having a studio affected how long of a day, a work day you have?
I actually work less hours now. Like
Wow.
before, I felt like I was, I'd wake up, I'd go to my desk and start working. And a lot of
Yep.
times I'd work until I went to bed,
Yeah.
So now it's like, I have more of a normal life. It's hard for me to like give myself a day off. I've been
Yeah.
trying to get, make sure I take one day off every week.
Yep.
But I don't have a strict schedule I have to stick to like someone that has a normal job. So
Right. A normal job. What's normal?
yeah, a 9 to 5 or whatever.
Have you ever been worried that like you might have to get a 9 to 5? Because it's pretty amazing that you've sustained yourself for 11 years with just making what you love to make.
Yeah, the first 5 years were rough. Like,
Yeah.
it was, it takes a while to build an audience, and
Mm-hmm.
because I was, kind of figuring out my product still, I didn't have like the like branding down right away,
Mm-hmm.
and that's such a huge part of being successful is like having consistency across,
Mm-hmm.
every platform.
Interesting.
So figuring all of that out really helped, to get my business to a new level. But until then, it was tough. I think there were a few times in the beginning where I applied for some jobs, kind of like I don't really want this job. I hope they don't really call me, but but I was able to, make it work.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's so cool. That's amazing.
thanks.
It's very inspiring because I think a lot of people think, no, I have to, like, I can't possibly live my dream and do what I want to
Right.
do. Like, do you feel like you've had to make sacrifices because of following your heart instead of, the normal
Yeah.
job?
Yeah, for sure. especially like in the, the beginnings of starting the business, I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't really able to travel or,
Right.
do a lot, eat out a lot or do the, things that
Mm-hmm.
are like fun because we just really couldn't afford to.
Right.
It's definitely a financial risk in the beginning, but it's
Yeah.
paid off. So
Yeah.
now it's like, hey, I can do things,
Yeah.
like things are normal for me. So, um, yeah,
So it sounds like it just takes
it just
time.
takes
And you just have to
time.
try. Like, if you're not successful in your first year, that doesn't mean you're not going to be
For
successful.
sure. I think it's just being persistent, like really believing in what you're doing and like
Mm-hmm.
really wanting it and um being resilient. My husband likes to use that word, just
Mm-hmm.
like being able to get past like the, being turned down to get into an event you really want to be at or,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of rejection
Ooh,
and
that
just
must be
being able to
hard.
like get past that and like, you know what? It's just not the right thing for me right
Yeah.
now. Like I still need to find that thing that is.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. And just keep following your path. And
yeah.
yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
So what about COVID? So I hate to bring it up, but
Yeah.
how has that affected the, work from home versus studio?
Yeah. So when COVID first happened, they kind of shut down our building,
Mm-hmm.
no one knew what was happening,
Yeah.
what to do. So I kind of like in a panic, like just moved a lot of my work stuff home,
Mm-hmm.
and figured out how to make space again in the house for me. Um, and yeah, it was different being home again. There were parts of it that were nice, but ultimately, I really missed being in my studio. I found it so hard to like motivate myself and like
Mm.
to not have those like set times that were like
Yeah.
separated. Like,
Interesting.
um, yeah, it made me really appreciate my studio
Wow.
again. And just I missed the community of being around other artists who were working
Mm-hmm.
is that's I feel like that's really important, and just
Yeah.
like seeing people,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So,
That's cool that it really like kind of validated that like, yes, made the right decision getting a
for
studio.
sure, yeah. I mean, at first, I was like scared about financially about whether
Right.
or not I was going to be able to keep my studio.
Yeah.
But luckily there were like grants available in St. Pete
Mm-hmm.
that were meant to be used just for that so that you wouldn't
Right.
have to lose your space. So
Yeah.
thank God for that because that
Yeah.
really
It's
helped me.
amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. Okay, so the future. What do you want to happen to Blossom and Shine? Like in 5 years, in 10 years, like what do you how is your like do you have any like crazy dreams of like someday I'd love to do this with my brand or
uh, I don't. I've never been like looking that far into the future. I feel like I'm always kind of just like one day at a time,
yeah,
especially in COVID
that's a good
times. It's
thing.
kind of like, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Like,
Right.
so, I
Totally.
mean, I think that's something that COVID has taught all of us,
Yeah, just take it one day at a time.
All I know is that I love what I do. I want to be able to keep doing it. And as long as I can figure that out, like I'm happy.
That's amazing.
So I definitely, like I said before, I'm always working on increasing my online sales.
Yep.
My husband and I have a dream of being able to spend our summers in New York and the rest
Yeah.
of the year in Florida because that's like down season for both of us. So
Yep.
if I can, have more online sales, that's going to allow me to be able to have that dream.
Right. Right.
So, but I love doing markets. Hopefully, I'll be able to continue doing those and,
Yep.
just kind of keep going.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
So, if someone does want to purchase something, via online sales or they want to see you in person, how can they reach out to you?
So my website is blossomandshine.com.
Mhm.
I have information on there about, where my studio is. If you want to reach out to me, my email's on there about stopping by the studio. This Saturday morning market is opening again, so I will be back there.
Okay.
Maybe not every weekend. So again, on my website under events, I have a list of all the places where you can find me.
Great.
And then you can always shop online and there'll be, sales coming up because of the holidays. So
Ooh, exciting.
yeah.
I might have to get a pair of earrings. I'm excited.
Good.
Awesome. Well, let's go head over to your studio and
Okay.
see all these amazing products that we've been talking about.
Okay, cool.
Thank you so much for being on this podcast.
Thank you.
All right. We'll talk to you soon. If you have any questions for us or need help getting started, check us out on social media. We are on Instagram at Conscious Accounting, and our website is conscious-accounting.com, or you could email us at info@conscious-accounting.com.